Thank you, everybody. Hopefully you all enjoyed that film. It is a little bit depressing. I hope you're all feeling okay. We are going to start this part of the session with some comments from our two guest speakers, who I introduced at the beginning, but I'll just say briefly again. They are Donna Chavis and Mac Legerton, who are two climate activists from North Carolina. Just to remind everyone, Donna's having some technical difficulties, so the sound will be coming from another account on here. So there may be a little bit of desyncing with her audio and visuals. But yes, please, Donna, take it away.
Yes, and I regret the technology that went down on me today, but I'm glad to be here. Let me just say that film doesn't make me depressed, it makes me angry, which for me is a mobilizing energy. And because I've seen it now 3 or 4 times, and I hate to have to report that things aren't much better in North Carolina than what you saw. We are actually looking at the announcement that Enviva just made that over the next 5 years, they're going to be increasing they're moving forward with plans to increase their production across the Southeast with new plants being built. The announcement by Enviva recently also was the announcement they're going to have their first contract with a business in the United States. So they will not only be supplying the largest amount of wood pellets in Europe and Asia, they're going to start supplying those same wood pellets in the United States. Now, one of the things that is striking here in North Carolina is that our governor had a clean energy plan that he released, and in it he openly stated that biomass was not a source of energy for our state. It didn't fit in his clean energy plans. However, the wood pellet industry has never been denied a permit for building the facilities to make that source of energy. So that has been a rallying cry in our state because it's just a hypocritical position for him to take. One of the things that has happened since I last saw that film is that there was an effort to open a new facility in our community, which actually was owned by a company in the United Kingdom, Active Energy Group. Since that time, we have been able to pretty much put that facility on hold. It's been almost 2 years now, and they have not yet opened the plant. In fact, they had to move for a short period to Maine in order to try to meet a contract that they had guaranteed, which they couldn't meet because they never got the permit. This is the first time in the state of North Carolina that this has happened. And so we are excited that the Citizen Action was able to put pressure on the regulatory agency, the Department of Environmental Quality, to force them to take the time before they gave an air permit. An interesting piece, though, that we did face, speaking of subsidies, is that this facility was given a $500,000 grant from our Commerce Department, which you heard about in the film, how Commerce supports this, before the air permit was even applied for. So that was something that we raised, and Commerce says, well, we got the request from the local community and we have to give the money. Well, what happens is when they give a $500,000 or $1 million subsidy, then the regulatory agency that gives the permits, there's pressure on them to do just that because there's already been a financial commitment. So we're working very, very hard in North Carolina to address these issues in our political world. And I want to say that because I admire the efforts that are going over in the UK to try and get the government to change the designation of wood as a carbon positive, green energy. That is something that we're paying much more attention to in this country. In my day job with Friends of the Earth, we're the climate energy justice team is paying great attention to the efforts in the United States at the EPA level to have wood pellets and factory farmed gas declared as eligible for credits, for energy credits, called to be determined to be renewable energy sources. If that happens, then we would be looking at the likes of, and this is the greatest example we have, Tesla getting government credits for using wood chips, wood pellets, and factory farm gas to supply energy to their EV stations to charge the cars. I give that example because what's happening globally is, you saw so much on that film, but since that film's been made, the movement is even faster to try to have these forms of energy declared renewable so that they can be used in a way across the board to supposedly lower our footprint, our energy footprint. And it's moving very quickly in the United States. So a lot of our attention is being given to trying to intervene with that and to keep those steps from being taken. I'm talking far longer than I planned to, so I'm going to stop there. And I hate that I have to leave, but Dorian, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you so much, Donna. Yes, I'm sorry that we've gone over a bit past what you anticipated. But yes, thank you so much for speaking. If tell you what, you jump off now. If anyone has any questions specifically for Donna, we'll get them to her later. But anything else more generally, Mac or myself or some of the many other very knowledgeable people on this call, I'm sure will be able to help us answer them. So yes, Donna, if you need to dash off, that's absolutely fine.
Yes, and I see a lot of North Carolinians here who could add to the story. Hi, Jack.
Definitely. Yes. Hi, Jack.
Bye-bye.
Great. All right. Thank you, Donna. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mac, we'll move on to you now. Take it away with your comments as well, please.
Yeah, I'm going to keep mine brief, Dorian, so we could have more dialogue. Donna and I and Belinda and others in North Carolina have been on a lot of calls with folks in Great Britain and Europe, and with the showing of this film and other programs. So I'd like to start with this broad sweep of what the real problem is. And across the planet, we're all inextricably linked with the production of wood pellets and other forms of false solutions to the energy crisis. But what is not being said is that for the first time in the history of the environmental protection and action work across the globe, industrial agriculture is now situating itself at the middle of the energy sector. And just take this in for a minute. Prior to recent history, industrial agriculture only was producing ethanol, corn-based ethanol, to go in gasoline. But with the development of what is called biomass and biogas, of which neither one of them are anything related to bio except bioharm, the economic and political power of industrial agriculture is now combined with the economic and political power of the fossil fuel industry. And this has never happened before. And so both the fossil fuel industry and industrial agriculture are now combined to ensure that we really never move, or at least move with them pulling and screaming and doing everything they can to avoid cutting carbon emissions at their source and really building a green economy around the world. So this has never happened before, that the two major economic and political powers in the United States, which are the fossil fuels and industrial agriculture, are now combined forces to create something we've never seen before in the environmental history of this nation and the world. So that's the challenge that we face in addressing wood pellets, bioenergy, all the false solutions that are out there. And so that's the situation we face. So Don and I live here in Robinson County, North Carolina, and in the county where the fifth wood pellet facility has been permitted. As Don explained, it's not going too well for them. and that's good. The other 4 plants are all owned by Enviva. They're all in Black communities. And in our county, we have the largest indigenous population east of the Mississippi. So all these throughout the southeastern part of the United States, all these facilities are located in what we now call internationally BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities. So this industry fits every description and every criteria for environmental racism in the United States. And my last comments are to open up the discussion. Well, what can we do? So first of all, we need to remove all the subsidies here and where you are to this industry. We need to remove its status as renewable and green. And we need to change the definition of renewable internationally, because when something is burned, when something is incinerated, when anything is incinerated, it is no longer renewable. I mean, renewable means not depleted when used. And when our trees and forests are cut down and polluting our communities, as burn shows here, sending it overseas to be burned, it meets no criteria for renewable. And the last thing we really need, I think we need to look at, is lawsuits that challenge this industry based on product fraud, deceitful marketing, and product liability. And overall, what we need to do is educate, organize, and advocate. And unfortunately, a lot of the statewide environmental groups, at least in the United States, they advocate in a vacuum. In our low-income communities, such as where we live, we have a history of environmental justice work going back 40 years here. North Carolina, as you know, is the home of the environmental justice movement. But other counties in Eastern North Carolina, where these facilities are, and around the Southeastern United States, don't have a history of organizing and education and advocacy. And so the very impacted communities need additional resources, because we can provide the voices and the political power to shift some of the policy issues here in the United States and in our states. And I would challenge all of you to the same, because for people of color in Great Britain and Europe and low-income people, white folk as well, there's solidarity in the sense that we're all impacted communities and constituencies by this industry. And we here and overseas need to be linking more with the diverse communities in your cities and rural areas as well. So I'm going to leave it at that, and we'll just open it up for discussion.
Thank you so much, Mac. Some really, really good points there made, I think. If everyone would like to start typing questions out in the chat, Mac and I will do our best to answer them. And if there's anybody else on the call who feels they've got particular expertise, then maybe we can get them on to answer it. But we've had a question from Alison already, which I think I'll take, which is that now that the UK has left the European Union, is it naive to think we might demand we close Drax? So both the UK and the European Union classify biomass as a renewable source of energy. The EU does it through its Renewable Energy Directive, or just RED. And I don't know if the UK's got a specific piece of legislation that calls it that, but we also have the same policy. So trying to overturn a big policy like that in Europe is obviously very, very difficult, because it's got to go through so many different countries. And there's places like Sweden, for instance, which are mad for bioenergy. They just want to cut down. They've got so many trees. They see it as such a fantastic opportunity. I think Sweden are one of the major culprits in this, in Europe at least. So yes, in theory, leaving the European Union might make it easier for the UK to turn against bioenergy. It's just, with the current government we have and the current incentives that exist for every government we will have in the future, the fight is hard. The fight is difficult because, you know, even if Boris Johnson loses his job in the next week, month, couple of years, the person who comes after him will have the same incentives to to be seen to be lowering carbon emissions in the UK. And so long as they've got enough people who will say, oh yeah, burning biomass is totally green, then they will continue to benefit from burning biomass, and Drax will stay open for as long as it benefits the people in charge. So we need to make it not benefit them. We need to cause as much of a stink about biomass burning as possible, and that's what we're trying to do with Biofuelwatch and the Cut Carbon Not Forests campaign, and in the UK at least, and that's what plenty of other people are doing in other countries around the world. I hope that answered your question, Alison. The next one we've got is, aren't there environmental laws, clean air laws, that can help communities in the USA? Mac, do you want to answer this one?
I can answer that very quickly. Yeah, the most significant environmental lawyer in the state that used to work for our Department of Environmental Quality no longer does, but he says, you know, all the environmental laws in the United States are created by industry. You know, they want to say that they're for being regulated, but minimally. So the problem with this industry, it's so new, there's not a lot of data about the highly polluting nature of it in local communities. With AERP, they're trying a whole new experimental process. So even our department gave them a permit when there's no data at all about the pollutants that they're releasing. So our laws in this country are very weak, and clean air laws are across the books harder to monitor and get documentation. You know, it's a lot harder than clean water, where you can go out to the water and really monitor it on a daily basis and go into the soil and everything else. So we do have some laws, but this industry is so new, there's so little known about it. And its influence, again, it's economic and political influence. It's not itself, it's industrial agriculture. And then they're selling this stuff to the fossil fuel companies. So we're and both on the national level, Secretary Regan of EPA, who came out of North Carolina, and Vilsack, Secretary of Agriculture in North Carolina, Regan supported this. And Vilsack, of course, industrial agriculture supports it. What we really need to do, and I'm getting ready to do a piece on it in the next 2 weeks, is get forestry out of industrial agriculture. That has actually been recommended by our federal government in the past, and it wasn't done. And we need to really, I don't know where it is situated in England and Scotland and Europe, but our forests are treated as capital commodity. The representative of the industry said that. And with climate change, our relationship with the forest have fundamentally changed. And we need to state that here and there and be very assertive about it. With climate change, the role and the capacity of our forest as the #1 resource, not just natural resource, the #1 resource to remove, store, and manage carbon are our forests.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
The second question is about we call it cross the creek in a rural way, cross the creek visits between us and across the Atlantic with, as we say, with y'all. And we really need to do that. And we can combine it with some ecotourism. Within an hour and a half of where we live, and Jack lives near it too, down in South Carolina is the largest statue garden in the United States. And it's in the middle of an old slave plantation land that was developed, and a lot of it was given to the state as a park, and the rest is a nonprofit. I run a little outfitter business on our Lumbee Lumber River. We now have a river keeper on our river for the first time, who's Lumbee, and in Eastern North Carolina, with all 5 of the facilities, we've started a coalition just of our wood pellet counties, and we're getting ready to start an alliance of state organizations to work with us. to get more resources for education and organizing in our communities. And we'd love to host some visits from y'all. I've been to Europe and Great Britain. My roots are English and Scottish, and we'd love to also raise some funds for some of us to visit there. And those tours do make a difference. They're documented, they're filmed, and as in Bern, can become very helpful on both sides of the creek on education, organizing, and advocacy. The shortcoming of Bern is it doesn't illustrate the diversity of our communities that are impacted, not only here in North Carolina, but also throughout the Southeast. This industry is one of the best examples of environmental racism in the world.
Yeah, no, and Mac's absolutely right. There have been some great articles in the past year, 6 months.
Yes.
One from CNN that stands out, which I've shared before. Enrico Brown, I think her name is, has done some great writing for Dogwood Alliance. Yeah, we will share those resources with people who've reserved a ticket through Eventbrite. I would just like to quickly go back to the question of sort of legal challenges and whether there's, there are regulations that can help us. Drax is the recipient of the largest ever fine for emitting dangerous pollutants from a wood pellet plant that it owned in Mississippi. It received a $2.5 million fine for breaching air pollutant restrictions over a number of years. Drax is also in court on Thursday in the UK in Leeds Crown Court in criminal charges of failing to protect its workers at its power plant from wood pellet dust, leading to health complications. So yes, campaigners are exploring sort of legal and legislative challenges to Drax and other companies like it. And if anybody is near Leeds and can get down to Leeds Crown Court at 11 a.m. on Thursday, the Axe Drax group will be very happy to have your energy to support their protest. But yes, I think we'll move on to the next question. I did say earlier that we would try and wrap this up by 8:30 GMT. There's too many good questions here. If you need to leave early, fair enough. But we hope you'll stick with us. But if in case anyone does decide they want to leave, I will just quickly give a plug. Cut Carbon Not Forests has a petition which you can sign, you can share. We're trying to hit 50,000 signatures by the end of March. Last I checked, we were on about 34,000. The experts in these sorts of things tell me it's possible, but we need all the help we can get. We're also asking people in the UK to write to their MPs. There's a super easy form for doing that through the CCNF website. I believe if you, I believe the website is just cutcarbonnotforests.org. And if you go on that, you will find a link to write to your MP. If you're in the US, I'm sure there are lots of other things you can get involved with as well. Excuse me. But yeah, so please do look at those if you do need to leave early. But let's move on to another question. Do you have a sense that the average UK or EU citizen knows where the bioenergy is coming from? In British Columbia, Canada, we are in the heartbreaking position of watching our last primary forest be ground up into pellets. This includes our globally unique inland rainforest. So I'm just wondering what your sense is in terms of how widespread this problem is known in Europe. Not at all. You're absolutely right. People in this country have no idea that forests are being cut down and wood from these ancient, gorgeous, incredibly biodiverse forests is being burned to generate their energy. They have no clue. I don't think most people in this country, occasionally we'll put something on social media from Biofuelwatch saying, oh, they're burning trees. And people saying, don't be silly, Drax burns coal. And we're like, they're not even denying that bit. We know they're burning wood. That's not the surprise here. It's how much they're burning and where it's coming from that's the problem. So no, in answer to your question, absolutely not. People in the UK, at least, still have no idea that wood plays such a role in our energy production, and they certainly don't understand where that wood is coming from, which is why screenings like this and people like you spreading the word are so important. I don't know if you want to add anything on that one, Mac.
Well, no, I just want to say, you know, I read the story that one of the environmental advisors for Margaret Thatcher wrote, Lord John, whatever his name was.
Randall.
Yeah, Randall has come out against this industry because of the subsidies. And you know, both here in the United States, there's an anti-government subsidy wing of the Conservative Party. And I think we need to nurture that and take advantage of that and use that, you know, because the extreme politics in this country, Republicans are, you know, totally now in support. I mean, 99.9% in support of the fossil fuel industry and certainly biomass and biogas. But in North Carolina, and the South, there is this anti-subsidy conservative element as well that we need to garner. And plus that this industry couldn't exist on the open market. You know, it is not a viable economic development project. It cannot exist without government subsidies, unlike other industries that have to survive without them.
I would just say in the UK, biomass subsidies fall under renewable energy subsidies, which is what makes it so sick. This money that is being given to companies that burn trees is the same money that should be going to genuine renewables like wind and solar. So the position we tend to take is not so much that we should get rid of the subsidies, it's that the subsidies should be appropriately distributed. They should go to genuine renewables. So yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly if it's the same.
Well, if we're going to move toward full electrification, which is the ideal, we've got to change the definition of renewable. That you can't, anything that is incinerated cannot be meet any criteria for renewable. I mean, we really, and in the environmental movement, we haven't explicitly taken that stand and pressed it that if you incinerate something, there is no way it can be called renewable. Like a farmer friend of ours, he calls it putting lipstick on a pig. You know, it's just, but of course, it's the economic and political influence that determines that status.
Sure. Yes, we've got a comment from someone from Selby pointing out that some of the laws that govern logging in British Columbia are even weaker than they are in North America. And some of the, I'll get it wrong if I try and quote anything, but if you look into it, some of what the logging companies are allowed to do in British Columbia is truly shocking. Okay, the next, I think this is a question. As an energy assessor involved with the EPC function, I think that the fact that biomass has never been part of its recommendation criteria speaks volumes about its detrimental impact. I'm not actually 100% sure what the EPC is. Is that an American thing, or have I just missed an obvious anagram?
I'm not sure either.
Energy performance certificate, I think. So yes. Well, yes, I think, you know, it's one of these hard things where the IPCC, for instance, will say that biomass is often part of a lot of their projections. And we find ourselves in a difficult position of not really wanting to come out against the IPCC because they say a lot of things that are really important. But you know, we do have to disagree with them occasionally. Oh yes, Alison's pointing out that quite a few of us have probably pledged to be flight free. I personally am. I haven't flown since 2016, but I'm sure you'll get somebody who wants to fly out to North Carolina and see the devastation firsthand. What action in UK and EU will address the subsidies? So the subsidies that Drax receives are set to expire in 2027. So part of it is trying to get the government to reassess, because the fact is these subsidies that Drax gets, they were locked in many years ago when the Drax's modus operandi was considered renewable by the government at the time. Nowadays, their criteria for awarding subsidies through a program called Contracts for Difference have tightened to the point that Drax would not be receiving the same subsidies now if they were to, if the rules they use now were applied when they were awarded the subsidies, they would not have got them. So we make that point to the government and say, please, like, apply your own rules to the people who are still getting your money every year. Reassess, stop giving them cash. So it's partly stop giving them what you're already giving them, but just as important is, for God's sake, don't lock yourselves into any more long-term subsidy programs that you're going to end up regretting. That's the other side of it. And, you know, all we can really do is make as much noise, write to as many MPs, do lobbying sessions and everything else we can do, really. And if you want to support us in any of that, the Biofuelwatch website, the Cut Carbon Not Forests website, there are ways to get involved. Of course, the best way to kill the market for biomass energy is to reduce our usage of electricity massively to squeeze carbon out of the grid. I was writing a report on this recently. Demand for electricity in this country is on its way down. I hope that's true in other places, because it's certainly true in the UK. Unfortunately, at the same time, we're also trying to, you know, phase out coal, use as little fossil gas as possible. And so biomass burning has increased as our demand has gone down. Also, our demand for electricity is probably going to increase as more people switch to electric cars. So it's complicated, but yes, absolutely. If we can reduce demand, if we can save energy by insulating our homes properly, that will definitely help with all aspects of the fight against climate change. I've been choosing to use electricity over gas for heating because I thought it was more environmentally friendly and cost efficient. Well, it is better than gas. You just need to be sure where your electricity is coming from. Wherever possible, stick with a 100% renewable energy tariff, and really look into the company that you're with that's providing you with your energy. See if they're actually getting their energy from renewable sources, or if they're just buying regos or whatever. I'm not going to go into what a rego is right now, it's quite complicated. But yeah, if you're on 100% renewable energy tariff, that's a really good start. Go ahead, Mac.
I like to answer this question, Dorian, related to what we do to keep reliable energy production while we're moving toward renewables. That's not the way the question is asked, but this is a critical issue, and the fossil fuel industry always uses it to say, we can't just, you know, we've got to keep our profits up while we shift toward renewables. And, you know, this whole emphasis with carbon offsets is just another false solution, in the sense that it's not real net zero. It's not real net zero. It's, you know, because the last thing they want to do is cut back their emissions. So one thing that I'm volunteering with is this new global carbon reward policy, and that's the website, globalcarbonreward.org. It's been created by an engineer in Australia. And one of his points, and it's hard to understand him because he's an engineer, so some of us are working with Dr. Dorian Chin to help popularize what he's proposing. His solution was used by Kim Stanley Robinson, the carbon coin, in his new book on Ministry for the Future, which is a science fiction book. But Dr. Chin is basically saying that, you know, we have to have energy reliability during this transition. So what we need to do is incentivize a reward program, an incentive program that only allows you to receive the incentives to move toward renewables when you cut back your emissions at their source at the same time. So he's developed a mathematical formula that you just can't, we should stop giving all incentives to fossil fuels, but give them incentives to invest in and create renewable sources. So we'll have energy reliability, but they can't get that incentive unless they rapidly reduce their emissions at source corporate wide, not one project at a time, because, you know, cap and trade, carbon tax, and all these other things, and carbon offsets, the industries are just using them to greenwash. And then the environmental groups are just debating, well, what will really work? So everybody's arguing about hydrogen and this and that and this and that, and dividing us all up when you know, we just need to get our governments to stop subsidizing these industries and provide subsidies to move to renewable as rapidly as possible, but don't give them unless they cut back their emissions at their source. The big problem we're having throughout the world is that fossil fuel production is expanding, mainly through methane gas. We got to stop calling it natural. There's nothing natural about it, but they're using liquid natural gas around the world now because that's the only fossil fuel where they can really make the most profit. And the world, we haven't educated our constituencies enough to understand that there's nothing, it's unnatural, it's methane, and methane is worse than burning coal. So we've got to create a new incentive program, and Dr. Chin calls it a reward program, because we have to keep energy reliability at the same time we're transitioning, and none of the environmental groups that I've seen have the answer to that except what Dr. Chin is proposing. I disagree with him on taking positions on all these project-based solutions when he has the systemic change recommendations that we need, including central banks forming a new form of international governance and utilizing the money from the central banks to print the money. So if all the major industrial nations print money, it won't be inflationary. And that's the problem with just printing money. So, you know, there are some solutions out there. People are looking at all these systemic solutions as well as project solutions, but our environmental groups are arguing about the project solutions when what we really need to do is create a whole new international carbon finance system and figure out how to do that. And what Dr. Chin is proposing is the first one I've seen. And that's where we really need to dialogue, is how do we create a new financial system to fund the transition to renewable energy? And unfortunately, most of us aren't economists, don't understand carbon financing at all. And what Dr. Chin is saying, we need to treat carbon as an asset rather than an offset. But we've got to have energy reliability as we move. Otherwise, the fossil fuel and now industrial agriculture is going to say, you need our products. And we're going to call them all renewable, even though we know we're not renewable. That's why I think we really need to start hitting them with lawsuits related to their product. Consumer liability lawsuits that say, this is fraudulent, this is deceitful, your product is not renewable, it's worse than burning coal, and, you know, get the courts involved. We have not got the courts involved against this wood pellet industry the way we do, and I think it's with product liability that we need to do it.
Yeah, okay. Is this related to the rumors about companies buying up Welsh farmland for this purpose? I assume that's a relation to growing biomass to be burnt. I'm not aware of that. It's entirely possible because while Drax, the largest, by far the largest of the UK's biomass plants, imports 99% of the wood that it burns, there's a lot of smaller ones which are using more domestic biomass. So yeah, possibly. And that's the problem. Even if you're using domestic biomass, if you're buying up farmland, which could be used to grow food, then, you know, you are harming the planet. You are, because that food needs to then be imported from somewhere else to feed our population. Yeah, changing land use is a dodgy area. And yeah, so I could well imagine that there are people trying to grow biomass in this country, and it's not a solution on its own.
Dorian, I just had a conversation with the director, with Joe, the director of Partnership for a New Economy. You know, you have a number of foundations in England that are looking at national and international climate change issues. And I'm just wondering if any of the groups there have talked to the Partnership for a New Economy about funding to help resource the organizing and education and policy work around the wood pellet industry. But there's a number of English foundations popping up now that are putting more money, and the Partnership for a New Economy is a bunch of foundations that have come together to do that. So I don't know what resources y'all are using. You know, the foundations in the United States are beefing up their support for against biomass and biogas as we speak. But that's another organizing effort we need, is to access more financial resources to more rapidly stop this industry. Eventually it will have to be stopped, but we need it, you know, we need it now, not 10 years from now.
Yeah, there's some great points in the chat about other options. Dynamic demand management. Power is dearer when it's scarce. Tiered pricing. More you use it, higher the cost per unit. I think that sounds like an interesting idea. I'd like to hear some more discussion of that. And yes, some other good points about buying energy from any company, even if they tell you they're buying 100% green energy. The energy is just coming from the grid, so it could be coming from anywhere. And of course, in this country, biomass is considered green energy. Therefore, your green energy could all be coming from biomass. And then who's that really helping? So it is tricky. You can ask your energy companies whether they get their energy from Drax. I guarantee you the first person you speak to on the phone will not know the answer. So you'll have to try quite hard, probably send a few emails, but eventually someone will be able to give you an answer to that. Mervyn, you're absolutely right. No one knows exactly where any particular bit of energy is coming from when buying it from the market. Okay, I think that is all of the questions we have, and we're down to the last baker's dozen of people left in the chat. So I think we will wrap it up there. Let me just say a huge thank you to everyone who has attended tonight. Huge thank you to Mac, and Mac, please pass our thanks on to Donna as well for excellent comments and your help with answering questions. Yeah, I think we've given everybody lots of actions. Please go and sign the petition, share the petition, write to your MP if you can. Stay informed about these issues and inform others around you, because as we've talked about, the biggest obstacle we face is ignorance, is people not understanding what this industry truly means. When they hear bioenergy, I think even a lot of sort of casual environmentalists hear that and they think, oh, well, that sounds good. That sounds like something, it sounds better than dirty coal. And you know, the main thing we can do to help is to help people realize that's not necessarily the case. There are better solutions. There are actual solutions, which are not false solutions. So yes, thank you all so much. Thank you, Mac. Thank you, Donna. And I will see you all again next time.